Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Willamette National Cemetery. We are here today to honor your loved one, Bernard. On behalf of the cemetery staff and our director, we would like to extend our sincerest condolences. We will now proceed with the military honors portion of the service. This will include a 3-volley rifle salute, the playing of taps, and the folding and presentation of our flag. If you are sensitive to loud noises, I would cover your ears when they open the flag because that is when the rifles will be going off. Okay? Thank you so much.
Please accept this flag as a symbol of appreciation for your honor, for your loved one's honorable and faithful service.
In behalf of the American Legion, It is a privilege for us to participate in this ceremony, recognizing and honoring this man's service to his country, to our country. This pouch contains 3 spent rifle cartridges, remembering the volleys which is fired. These volleys represent duty, honor, country. And now may God grant you, all of you, peace, comfort, and yes, even joy.
And on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs and a grateful nation, this is a Presidential Memorial Certificate in honor of his faithful service.
Thank you.
I also have this envelope for you. It has a map to his final resting place, a letter from our director, and a few other resources. Should you need us for any reason, please don't hesitate to reach out. This now concludes military honors. We will now hear from your speaker.
I'm so nervous. I'm not a eulogist, I'm not a professional in this world at all. I'm an English teacher from Modesto. And I will 100% cry. And it's okay if you do too. I've got a lot to say and not a lot of time to say, so I'm just going to start with a poem that sort of summarizes a lot of what I'll then say in more detail thanks to the copious notes that Silvana sent. This is called Running Home, an elegy for Dr. Moe. Bernard Morris left this world in the exact same way that he came into it. Too soon, born premature, died premature, but in between, what a life. In the dash that connects July 25th, 1935 to June 22nd, 2025, you can fit a galaxy of love and life and literature and finally finding home far, far away from where he began. Bernard had a cruel father, abandonment, abuse. Poverty was a blanket he wore to sleep in his trailer, which he grew to hate until he flew the coop. Literally, he stole a plane with his friend and flew to greener pastures. Bernard, as his mother called him, was a hellion, which is why he spent the rest of his life looking for heaven. He tried farm work, railroads, the Marine Corps. Then he fell in love with California, where he was stationed in San Diego, where libraries and books became his allies. He would spend the rest of his life defending their honor as a professor of English. Poetry was the helmet he wore into battle, and his heart always won. Bernard used to run 100 miles a week, sometimes in the heat of Modesto, but in those days, he wasn't running away from life. He was running towards his life, a light of love, the love of his life, Silvana. From the Latin word silva, or forest, she was the shade, the canopy, the calming wind that a boy needs when he grows up whirling. She was the earth he ran on, the mother he loved, the home he had been searching for his whole life. Some people are lucky enough to fall in love, while others get back up and run with it everywhere they go, from Disneyland to Portugal to the inky tips of a ballpoint pen that pens love notes to his grandchildren. What a grand life Bernard led. So instead of grieving his loss, let us celebrate that he crossed the finish line with peace and joy and love in his heart. Bernard did not die. Bernard just finally won his race. I met, very quick aside, I was a 25-year-old English instructor applying to the only college that would interview me, and it was Modesto Junior College, and they sat me. I first met Silvana. She was the first person I met, and she just smiled and beamed with this just fascinating sense of love, and I felt like I was home. And they put me in a stranger's office, and in this office there were love notes everywhere and photographs everywhere. And it was a very intimidating interview. After I graded my paper in this office, I then was placed into a classroom with 8 faculty members in a big horseshoe, and I was like a criminal being interrogated right in the center. And I broke the ice by saying, "Who's in love in there? Who the hell is so in love?" Everywhere you look, love notes. And they all started giggling, and they said, "Oh, I think that's Bernard&Silvana, Bernard&Silvana." So that was how I got to know that Founders Hall was just filled with love. And he was a man whose life started rough but ended well, and today I want to tell you a little bit about that life. And when there's like a 5-minute warning, can you give it to you? Bernard was born at the Salvation Army Hospital in San Antonio, Texas on July 25th, 1935, 2.5 months premature. He was a fighter from the start. The odds were against him from the moment he opened his eyes, and yet, even in those earlier moments, he chose to stay, to survive, to grow. He had tenacity and grit. He was born with it. "You'll never fence me in." He had that spirit and followed him the entire life. He grew up poor, trailer poor, not nostalgic, cute Airstream trailer poor. This was the kind of place that made him say, even decades later, "never again." Which is why it's such a poetic twist that Silvana, his wife, his foil, his soulmate, convinced him to get an RV in 2020. It took a global pandemic and some grandchildren to twist his arm, but she did it. And what a full circle moment. Bernard's father was mostly absent, and when he wasn't absent, he was cruel. There's one memory, him and his brothers. The dad let him try chewing tobacco. They wanted to know what it tastes like, so his father gave them each a glob, but didn't tell them that they should spit it out. They all turned green. The boys wretched with sickness. It was a cruel lesson, but one that stuck, and Bernard never did smoke again. He took things literally. He was riding in the back of a pickup truck, and his dad yelled, "We're out of gas." The truck was still moving. Bernard couldn't make sense of it. The man was out of gas. Why won't they stop? He was inquisitive, curious, driven his whole life by a need to understand how things worked, from mechanics to literature to relationships to life. He was the youngest of 3, tormented by his older brother Leroy. "Someday I'll beat the shit out of you." But he never got quite big enough. Leroy was 6'3" and 250 pounds. But still, he never let Leroy forget that promise. Bernard may have been smaller in stature, but if you judge a man's strength by the size of his heart and mind, then Bernard was a giant. The boys were hellions. That's what their mother called them. They played with bullets. Actual bullets. And they put them in this oil drum fire, and the bullets were popping everywhere. "Don't do this." They were not just boys being boys, they were fearless and a little bit nuts, and honestly kind of lucky to be alive. I put in my notes, disclaimer to grandkids, don't ever try this. Young Bernard sold newspapers as a kid, remembering the headlines, "The war is over" in 1945. Thereafter, he was fascinated by World War II, his shelves a testament to his fascination with the madness and morality of war. He'd ride the bus by himself into downtown San Antonio for a nickel to see Gene Autry and Fred Astaire films at the Majestic Theater. He never had enough money for the roasted peanuts outside. But he smelled them, and that smell stayed with him forever. And Gene Autry's "Don't Fence Me In," that wasn't just a song, that was his life's chorus. They tried to corral him as a child and fence him in, but Bernard would soon learn about the power of freedom through education. As a boy, there was an infinite promise from from his father. "Ponies," he said. "Go to South Carolina, boys, I'll give you each a pony." Bernard wasn't going to be left behind. To hell with that idea, he said, when his older brother said he should stay home with his mom. And off they went, and sure enough, no ponies. Just a drop off on Granny and Pa Henry's farm, where "I'll cut your back" became the soundtrack of their childhood. That's what Ground said. "I'll cut your back," but it sounded like "Cuccio, Cuccio. They worked hard, but they did accidentally set part of the forest on fire. They survived, but there would be more fires to come. When their mother walked in 11 months later, Bernard remembered her words exactly. "Where are my boys?" He couldn't tell that story without choking them. He never forgot it. And this is where it gets crazy. In high school, this is a true story. Bernard had a best friend named Warren Page. They were outsiders, thinkers, idealists. When they were 16, they stole a Civil Air Patrol plane. How do you steal a plane? Warren knew how to fly and Bernard navigated, but they had to stay low enough to see the street sign, the telephone pole. So you can imagine 2 boys in this plane that they stole, and then they landed on a farm near Oklahoma City and asked for a job. The boss, Jake, hired them and paid them $10 a day plus room and board. Jake named them the Flying Hay Crew. Sadly, 2 girls were their downfall. They decided they need to impress these girls. They said, "Hey, we'll give you a ride." They pulled the plane out from under the canopy and trees, and then just like that, the FBI descends. Boo! Come out with your hands up. They were returned to San Antonio in the custody of their parents, but they weren't. No charges were filed, but they did have a photo in the paper. They were kind of hometown celebrities for a while. Bernard could find adventure anywhere, and more importantly, he was the kind of person others trusted to come along for the ride. Bernard was a man who, even at 16, wasn't afraid to get lost because he knew he'd find something worth discovering along the way. He joined the Marines in 1954, naively signing up for 4 years when the guy next to him talked his way into 3. He hated being a drill instructor, but he loved California. He fell in love with San Diego and then later Berkeley, and he learned on a $5 budget how to hitchhike from base to home and back. He could stretch a nickel into a novel. His mind was vast, but his wallet tight. As a quick aside to prove his cheapness, but this story got me, man. He was getting married to Silvana in Vegas. My man drove all around looking for a parking meter that still had time on it. He found one with 25 minutes. And that's exactly how long the wedding took. He said, "That'll do." And they ran, signed the papers, and they were married before the quarter ran out. He went from Marine to scholar, earning a PhD in 17th century English literature from UC Berkeley, writing about Tristram Shandy, which is the most non-linear, meandering, ridiculous novel imaginable. And nobody's read it. Nobody, which again was perfect for Bernard. Bernard was Tristram Shandy in human form, digressive, hilarious, sometimes manding, but always brilliant. He met and married his first wife, who was a UC Berkeley student, who was from Yugoslavia, and the 2 of them had a child in 1973. And just a quick aside about them, they went to Yugoslavia, they ordered some fish, and then they waited and waited and waited, and then finally they brought the fish that they had just caught outside of the restaurant and said, "Will this do?" And that was their meal for the night. In 1968, they welcomed their daughter, Georgiana. In 1972, while working on his PhD, Bernard got a temporary job at Modesto Junior College, which became a full-time, permanent job. And he bought his first house, the Chabot Courthouse, which he was very proud of and lived in for 42 years. And you guys probably remember that one. For 30 years, he taught English at Modesto Junior College. He wrote books. He ran marathons. He became a vegetarian way before it was cool. He prepared his own meals and walked to the grocery store daily. His cars lasted forever because they were barely used. And then Silvana. In 1994, he met his second wife, Silvana, who had been recently hired as secretary to the Literature and Language Arts Division. He left poems on her desk. He brought her soup when she was sick. He bought a 1500cc Valkyrie motorcycle in 1996 to celebrate her 40th birthday, and they roared through Yellowstone. They danced through California. They disagreed on music. She shared Wicked Game, and he yodeled right over it. They went to concerts, they laughed, they fought, but they made each other whole. He loved Brazil when he didn't speak the language. He pantomimed his way through hardware stores and in the supermarket where he would buy his favorite Amendon Parado con Castanet, roasted in the shells, the peanuts that he couldn't afford as a child, he can now buy now. The smell reminding him so much of those old days. Bernard may have been cranky at times, but he was loyal, at times unbearable, but always unforgettable. At Disneyland, he argued with the staff over soda refills that were not free. He was un-American. He would shout only to be called out by an 11-year-old, complaining again? Yes, he was, and unapologetically slow. He loved movies, loved Shane, loved the moral arc of good men beating evil. He wrote poems to his grandchildren. He soaked in joy, and as he wrote, quote, because of Silvana, I have learned the joys of stepfatherhood, of papahood. I've finally learned the blessings that good humans can bring into this world. In the last chapter of his life, he slowed down. His world got smaller, and yet, in his words, everything I wanted was in this room. His wife, his cats, a lifetime of stories to hold close. So here we are, gathered to celebrate a man who was as poetic as he was profane, as disciplined as he was defiant. He was complicated, he was funny, he was loved, and as his family and friends, we're the lucky ones who got to orbit around his great burning star. When you look up, he will be there in the shimmer, the flicker, the defiant little blaze of memory that refuses to go out. Some stars explode, some fade, but the brightest ones, like Bernard, leave behind a light that keeps traveling, keeps touching, keeps warming us long after they're gone. May we carry that light forward. May we burn a little brighter because of him. On behalf of Silvana, I want to thank everybody for being here. Your presence matters more than you know. And to Bernard, may your next great adventure be as wild and wonderful as your last. Good night, love. Good night, sweetheart. And I think that concludes where he comes.
That choked me up a little too. You were really good. I did want to say thank you all so much for allowing us the privilege of honoring him with you today. He will be laid to rest directly after this. A temporary marker will be laid, and then within 60 days, that permanent one will be there for you. They normally come in about a month. As long as they're not cracked, broken, misspelled, we will have it laid for you then. So if you want to give me a call, it most likely will be there. Thank you all again so much. If you'd like to say your final goodbyes, and then I will take them